Hi, I'm Tim Mecklem, and I'm going to go through a quick walkthrough of how to solder the header pins onto a Raspberry Pi Zero. I have an upcoming project where I'd like to use one, but I need the header pins soldered on, and they don't come with them. So I'm just going to do a couple of tricks that I've learned along the way of trying this out, and I figured I would take you along for the ride as well. So the first thing you need is a Raspberry Pi Zero. I have a Raspberry Pi Zero wireless. It has a little antenna there, you can see. And my goal here is to put these pins on there. Now you can buy 2 by 20 pins, which is what this is. It's 2 wide and 20 deep. But those are a little bit harder to find than the 1 by 40s that you can usually find. So we can make do with 1 by 40 by cutting it in half. So that's the first thing I'm going to do here. And really, the easiest way that I found rather than counting out 20 is to just figure out where the hole is, kind of mark it, and then use something to cut it. And if you did it right, you'll end up with 2 equal-sized 1 by 20s. We want this to be on the top of the board because that's how most of the Raspberry Pis are laid out. I don't know why, maybe it's just convention, but I like to keep the 2 clean sides on the same end, and I put that on pin 1. So that's what it's going to look like when we're finished. One of the tricks that I've learned in doing this is that if you stick the header row into a breadboard, it will do some of the work for you by holding all the pins in place. And then the only thing that you need to make sure is that you have the Raspberry Pi seated flat on it. You see how it kind of wiggles a little bit? You don't want to have it wiggle. So a couple things you can do, one of which is really just stick another breadboard underneath it, and that'll kind of hold it in place. Once you get it basically where you want it to go, you take the soldering iron, and I can't remember the term for this. I'm not that good at it, and I don't do it that often. But you kind of want to like tin up the soldering iron and get it to the point where it will melt solder. And all I'm going to do right now is just touch the corners of it. So I just want to get the corners soldered in. Once I've got the corners, I really actually don't need to keep it in the breadboard anymore. I'm going to go ahead and leave it in there because it's actually just easier to hold it. But you can see that the pins are now stuck in there, and I can just kind of go one by one and solder them on relatively quickly. This doesn't take a whole lot of expertise. There's a little bit of practice involved. I'm not the best at it, but I can get the job done. And that's really all I need for my projects. You want to see the solder really adhere to both the pin and to the surface on the Raspberry Pi itself. And you don't want to hold the iron on there much longer than you have to. The longer that you hold the iron on, the more likely it is that you'll melt some of the surface of the Raspberry Pi Zero. You can also use a magnifying glass. There's also these things that they sell at places like Harbor Freight called Helping Hands. For this kind of pitch work, this is like pretty normal breadboard style work. You don't really need to be able to see that closely what's going on. You can use them. It's especially helpful if you have trouble seeing what it is that you're doing. In this particular case, it's pretty easy for me to see what's going on here. I usually go back afterward and kind of look at a magnifying glass to see if my job that I did was sufficient, was adequate for what I'm looking for. Again, I'm not looking for perfection when I do this. I'm really just trying to make something that works. Sometimes I get a little bit too much on the iron and it comes off a little funny from the pen. I think this might also be a temperature issue. When you get really good at this, you can just fly right through this. This is an easy job. But for me, I do this maybe a couple times a year. And so I have to kind of reinitiate myself on how it all works. One thing that's a little bit new is soldering when there's a camera on. That kind of makes all the nerves jump a little bit more. And you want a steady hand when you're soldering. So that's basically it. I think I might have been off camera for some of that, but the end result is that you have a 2x20 header pin soldered onto the Raspberry Pi. And at this point, you can kind of pull it off, and there you have your neatly stacked headers, and you're ready to go.